missionary outreach to your streets. I came to tell you my story. I came with a prayer that you'll hear something in my story that will help you understand this great work and understand how you might get involved to help save more lives right here in your own hometown. I met someone today, a man who's from Brownwood, Texas, 45 miles from where I grew up, right here, Diane's husband, a Texan who probably knew a little bit about me because he knew somebody I knew. Because you see, when I was 16, I found myself pregnant. That was a long time ago, and the choices were very different then. You either disappeared into a home where you were so shamed they changed your name, or you had a fast wedding and the baby came early. We remember. The father and I took responsibility. We had that fast wedding and the baby came early. While I was on the delivery table looking at this beautiful little blonde boy who would surely someday want to be president of the United States. I don't want him to be now. His father went to the front office and named my son Joe Bob. I really don't know what I expected. His name was Jim Bob. I didn't take any chances. When I found myself pregnant the second time, I named that one Kelly before I went to the delivery room. That would work either way, boy or girl, and we had the perfect family, a son, a daughter. I should tell you that I worked and he got our degree. He got our degree in August and I got my divorce in November. It was not his fault. It was my fault. I didn't have a standard in my life. I just looked at him one day and thought, I don't like you anymore, and I divorced him. It was the late 60s, early 70s, free love, flower children. And I found that man that just made my heart stop. But he came with something else. He came with an agreement that there would be no more children. He said, if you get pregnant, will you have an abortion? I never planned to get pregnant. And I said yes. And you know what happened? 2 weeks after Roe v. Wade, I found myself pregnant. And my choice was clear. It was my husband or my baby. And I made the wrong choice. I chose my husband. The very moment that anesthesia wore off, I can still remember being in that hospital bed, looking at that television thinking, I'm a murderer. I've just killed my baby. But you can't call your mother or your best friend. You can't say, I just killed someone. I'm a murderer. But surely my husband would understand. He was part of it. But he said we'd made the best choice we could and we needed to go on with our lives. And I hated that man. I hated him. I wanted him to hurt as I hurt, as surely our baby had hurt. And I acted out that anger. I started very gently. I just stopped washing his underwear. That did not seem to hurt him. But I got his attention. I had an affair, and now we're on the way to the divorce courts for a second time. I see other destructive behavior in my life. I am abusing my daughter physically and mentally, not understanding it's because she is the same sex as the child whose life I took by abortion. And old Joe Bob, I'm overprotecting him, expecting the police to pull up to my door and say, Mrs. Everett, your son's been killed. Oh, by the way, God's even with you now. Go on with your life. Subconscious. But my children were victims of that abortion as well. Nothing worked in my life, but I found something that did. Every time I sold another woman an abortion, if I told her abortion was good for her in some very sick, twisted way, maybe I was okay. And I evolved into the abortion industry, working for a man who had 4 clinics. I managed 2 of them. I more than doubled his business, but he would not share that money with me. So I took his best abortionist for it's not if, it's when you kill a woman, you must have a doctor willing to help you in the cover-up. The first month we opened our clinic, we did 45 abortions. The last month I was there, we did 545 abortions. And why do I remember those numbers? Because my commission was $25 for each abortion. $13,625 the last month, but my plan was to be a millionaire. And I needed to do 40,000 abortions a year to do that. And I had a strategic plan in place. It was this. I had to have 5 clinics surrounding the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We had 2 open. We planned to open 3 more the next year. They would pay for themselves the first month and be cash cows the second month. But we had to solve our internal problems first. Now, I've got to tell you about selling abortions because I'm sure some of you went selling abortions. So how do you sell an abortion? Well, our goal was 3 to 5 abortions from every girl between the ages of 13 and 18. Now, why did we want to target that age? Because if she started using abortion as a method of birth control early in her childbearing years, she would continue to use it as a method of birth control throughout her childbearing years. So it was important to reach her early. Now, you just can't go to these 12-year-olds and say, next year I want you to start getting pregnant so you can have abortions. So you have to break down the natural modesty, you have to separate them from their parents and their values, and you have to become the expert in their lives. And how do you do that? Well, it's sex education. You've heard it. These kids shouldn't have sex, but they're going to have sex, so we need to teach them how to have safe sex, or safer sex. Well, the next time you hear that, I just want you to use one of those old Texas sayings. Baloney. We do not take our children out, get them really good and drunk, and try to teach them how to drive safely drunk. We give them a moral absolute. Don't drink and drive, for you could be killed. Now, why in the world would we compromise them in this important area of their sexuality by giving them this low moral standard to live down to, rather than the very highest and best, abstinence until marriage, which works every single time? But we didn't say that because we wanted to get these kids, so we went into the schools and we went into churches and we said, you know, we want to help you teach these kids how to have safe sex. And the program starts in kindergarten, and right now they're using the incest education, so you need to find out what they're doing in your school. This is a good county and you probably don't have any problems, but you need to know what's there. So go to your public libraries, go to your school libraries. If your children are in public schools, go to the school. Ask to see the curriculum. Find out what they're teaching. Don't let them start telling your kids that sex is safe outside of marriage, and don't let them do sex education in mixed company. The boys need to be separated from the girls. This is biology. This is not how to, and make certain they're not teaching how to, because that's what we did. Our program started in kindergarten, and in kindergarten they put the kids in a circle and they go around the room and they ask them all the same question. What do your parents say to call your private parts? Well, you know and I know every family in the world has a different name for the private parts. So by the time you reach the 3rd or 4th child, it is clear to those children their parents simply do not know what they have. But we did. And we said, boys, this is what you have, and girls, this is what you have, and don't be ashamed of your private parts. Have you ever met a kindergartner in the world ashamed of anything? You could see them sharing. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, the agenda continues. Break down the natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values, and become the expert. Intercourse in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. These kids aren't interested in intercourse, but we used little 12-inch square books with 6- and 7-year-old nude models with diagrams to show them how to have intercourse, 1 per classroom. They don't use those books anymore. The books they use now are called It's Not the Stark, and that's for 4-year-olds up. It's so amazing, and it's perfectly normal. And they are all perverted. They're cartoons, they're both genders together, and they would embarrass every person in this room. Go to your library, see if Robbie Campbell's 3 books, It's Not the Stark, It's So Amazing, and It's Perfectly Normal, are in your libraries. You'll be surprised what you find in the sex education section. I continue to be shocked every time I go to the library and walk in that section. In the 4th grade, the children are encouraged to masturbate alone, and then in groups of 4 or 5 the same sex. Don't understand how that fits into abortion, but that's what they do. And then in the 5th and 6th grade, someone like me comes in. This was my specialty. In the 1st class, they'd be at the back of the room. In the 2nd class, they would be at my feet, because now I'm going to talk to them about getting sexually active. Now is the time for us to get them in. And you know, it's so easy to get those kids to laugh about their parents and their values, and the minute they're nodding their heads about their parents and their values being so crazy, so terrible, that's when you say, they wouldn't teach you how, they wouldn't help you if you decided you wanted to have sex, keep from getting pregnant, would they? No. Come to me. Here's our card. And the next day they came. Those girls could not drive. They would come in, and we would give them a low-dose birth control pill we knew they would get pregnant on. How did we do that? We gave them a birth control pill that in order to provide any level of protection had to be taken accurately at the same time every single day. We knew full well there's not a teenager in the world that does anything at the same time every day. We could look at those statistics and tell that anytime she went on any method of birth control, that sexual activity would go from 0 or once a week to 5 to 7 times a week. That pill would not work. And so we would see her again. Now she's scared because she's pregnant. And when she called, our phone was answered on the second ring by someone who had been skillfully trained as a telemarketer. They sold over the telephone. We didn't call them telemarketers. That's far too harsh. We called them telephone counselors. Isn't that sensitive? And when she confessed, I think I may be pregnant, this counselor would reach for a sheet of paper, a separate sheet for every client, and start using the script that's designed to overcome every single objection. That's what sales is, isn't it? Overcome the objection and you get the order, in this case, the abortion. We can take care of your problem. No one needs to know. What's the first day of your last normal period? Just like they ask at the pregnancy center. The girl figures that date, gives it to the so-called counselor who puts it on a wheel. It's actually designed to calculate the birth date of the baby. But she doesn't talk about birth date or baby. She says, you're 8 weeks pregnant. Now, what did she do? She confirmed that poor young woman's very worst fear. And she planted the first seed in this long marketing thread. I'm pregnant. Is this good news or bad news? If it were good news, she would not be calling the abortion clinic. When she replies bad news, this counselor moves right back in. We can take care of your problem. No one needs to know. And what in the world are they asking that question for? She's looking for the fear. Why does she want the fear? She's going to use it to reaffirm that abortion decision anytime that young woman moves away. Your parents don't have to know. You don't have to miss work. You don't have to miss drill team. And the girl just blurts out whatever's bothering her. And that telephone counselor moves on, armed with everything she needs. Get your money, come on in. Saturday's the busiest day in the abortion business. Sadly, I'm certain that there are girls very near us tonight who had abortions today. Friday's the second busiest and Wednesday's the third busiest. They do the big baby abortions first. Yes, they do abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy. Now, why do they do that? Not because of Roe v. Wade, but because of Doe v. Bolton, the case out of Georgia, heard the very same day as Roe, that said for the health of the mother, an abortion could be completed through all 9 months of pregnancy. The problem was we knew that health encompassed mental health. And we would say to this frightened young woman, you would have problems with this pregnancy should you carry it to term, wouldn't you? She would say yes, and we'd charted anxiety. And I'm sorry to tell you, the biggest baby I ever personally held still was 32 weeks. That baby clearly could have lived outside its mother's uterus. Abortions in this nation cost from $300 in Iowa to $12,000 in California. Yes, that's a second and third trimester abortion. They do the late-term abortions first because that woman is going to lose more fluid. She's going to have to stay in recovery longer. So they bring her in early, utilize the recovery room from the very beginning. That abortionist can do 3 of those second and third trimester abortions an hour. Let's just say he's doing that $4,000 abortion in Atlanta. 50% of that procedure goes into his pocket, $2,000. $6,000 an hour is not bad money, is it? Oh, we all know more than 90% of abortions are first trimester abortions, so he can't make that much money doing a $300 abortion. But we had a technique to keep him doing 10 to 12 abortions an hour. Each of our abortionists had 2 teams of 2 assistants working with them. And the first team would set up that first young woman, and the abortionist would go in to do that abortion, while across the hall, the second team set up the second young woman. And when he finished that first abortion, he went across the hall. He didn't stop to do operative notes. He didn't stop to do a surgical scrub. He went in that second room and changed gloves and started abortion number 2. While team number 1 had to get this first girl out to recovery, clean the room, get girl number 3 up, so when he finished that second abortion, he could go back across the hall to keep his numbers at 10 to 12 an hour. In the first trimester, he pockets a third of the fee, $100, $1,000, $1,200 an hour, with an added benefit that you and I do not share. We did not want to be responsible for any portion of our abortionist malpractice insurance. They were not our employees. They were independent contractors. We kept 2 sets of books, one where we collected their money, one where we collected our money. On a day like today, we did not know which abortionist would do which abortion because we would work 2 or 3 abortionists on busy days. There was simply a receipt on each chart. They would collect them, bring to the front at the end of the day. We would balance them and pay them in cash. No 1099, no W-2. But I'm certain those people killing babies for a living report every cent to IRS, don't you think? I forgot to tell you one thing. We passed out condoms. We didn't pass out first quality condoms. We passed out seconds or defective condoms. And if you think those family planners that are running around this country are buying first quality condoms, think again. Think again. They don't work because there's almost a purpose for them not to work. And today, there's a 42% repeat rate. 42% of abortions are repeat abortions.